The massive crystal dome of the Imperial Palace gleamed under three purple suns as Dr. Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle. Her worn boots clicked against polished obsidian floors that reflected her nervous face back at her. She clutched her medical bag tighter, knowing that inside this alien fortress, one wrong move could mean death. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this sector of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Their empress, Vexandra, was legendary for her cruelty and her collection of deadly creatures from across the known worlds. Sarah had heard the stories during her 5-year journey here. Diplomatic missions that ended in executions. Trade negotiations that concluded with entire crews being fed to exotic predators. Yet here she was, the first human ever invited to the Imperial Court. The invitation had arrived at Earth's medical research station 6 months ago. The message was simple but terrifying. Your healing arts are required. The Empress's most prized creature suffers. Succeed and your species gains favor. Fail and your world burns. Sarah's escort appeared without warning. A 7-foot-tall Zephyrian guard materialized from what seemed like empty air, his 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. His serpentine head swayed as he studied her with golden, unblinking eyes. "Human," he hissed through a translator device. "You will follow. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. Do not look directly at her imperial magnificence." They walked through corridors lined with cages containing creatures Sarah had never imagined. A massive spider with crystalline legs that rang like bells when it moved. A floating jellyfish-like being that sparked with purple electricity. A wolf-sized creature that appeared to be made entirely of living metal. But these were just the minor exhibits. The throne room doors stood 30 feet tall, carved from a single piece of black diamond. As they opened, Sarah felt the temperature drop 20 degrees. The chamber beyond was vast enough to house a small city. Bioluminescent vines crawled up the walls, casting an eerie blue glow over everything. Empress Vexandra sat upon a throne made from the fossilized remains of some ancient space whale. She was beautiful in the way that poisonous flowers are beautiful, striking but deadly. Her scales shifted between deep purple and silver as she breathed. Her 4 arms were adorned with jewelry made from the bones of defeated enemies. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had never been denied anything. "So," the Empress said, her words echoing through the chamber, "Earth sends me a small female to heal my precious Nethys. How amusing." Sarah forced herself to remain calm, despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "Your Majesty, I've studied every known form of serpent biology during my journey here. If you could tell me about the creature's symptoms." A laugh like breaking glass cut her off. "Symptoms? Child, Nethys is no ordinary serpent. She is a void viper, the last of her kind. Her venom can kill a starcruiser crew in seconds. Her scales can deflect plasma cannons. She has been my companion for 300 years. The Empress gestured with one clawed hand, and a section of the floor began to descend, revealing a circular pit 50 feet across. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw what lay within. The creature was magnificent and terrifying. Easily 100 feet long, its body was as thick as an ancient earth redwood tree. Its scales were midnight black with veins of silver that pulsed with an inner light. But something was clearly wrong. The great serpent lay motionless except for labored breathing. Its silver markings flickered weakly, and patches of its scales had turned a sickly gray color. 3 weeks ago, the Empress continued, Nethys began to weaken. My court physicians are baffled. They speak of cellular decay, of some unknown poison affecting her at a molecular level. If she dies, the temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Your species will learn why we are called the Empire of Endless Night. Sarah approached the edge of the pit carefully. Even sick, the Void Viper was the most dangerous creature she had ever encountered. As she watched, one massive eye opened and fixed on her, The intelligence she saw there was unmistakably hostile, but also curious. "May I examine her, Your Majesty?" "You may try. Though I warn you, Nethys has killed the last 3 physicians who attempted to treat her. Their remains fertilize my garden." A platform lowered Sarah into the pit. The serpent's head, easily the size of a small vehicle, turned to track her movement. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears as she approached the creature. "Hello, beautiful," she whispered, surprising herself with the gentleness in her voice. "Let's see what's wrong with you." The void viper's massive head tilted slightly, as if surprised by the tone. Sarah had spent years working with dangerous earth snakes before joining the space program. She knew that aggression often came from fear or pain. Moving slowly, she extended one hand toward the creature's snout. "I'm not here to hurt you. I want to help." The serpent's forked tongue flicked out, tasting her scent. For a moment that stretched like eternity, woman and viper studied each other. Then, impossibly, the great head lowered slightly, allowing Sarah to touch the scales near her nose. They were burning hot and rough where they should have been smooth. Sarah's medical training kicked in as she examined the creature more closely. The gray patches weren't just discoloration, they were areas where the scales were literally dissolving. Something was eating the viper from the outside in. "Your Majesty," Sarah called up from the pit, "this isn't a disease or poison, it's an infestation. Something is consuming her scales at the molecular level." "Impossible," the Empress snapped. "Nothing can harm Nethys. Her biology is perfect, evolved over millions of years." "That might be exactly the problem," Sarah replied, pulling out her scanner. "Sometimes the most perfect systems are the most vulnerable to the right kind of attack." As she ran her instruments over the serpent's scales, Sarah began to piece together what was happening. The readings were unlike anything in her databases, but they reminded her of something she had seen once in a research paper about bioengineered parasites. "I need to run some tests," she announced. "But I think I know what's killing her." The void viper's eyes followed Sarah as she worked. There was something almost trusting about the way the creature allowed her to take scale samples and blood specimens. When Sarah accidentally stumbled and put her hand on the serpent's side to steady herself, Nethys didn't attack. Instead, the great creature made a sound almost like a purr. From above, Empress Vexandra watched with growing amazement. In 3 centuries, Nethys had never allowed any being to touch her without attempting to kill them. Yet this small human female moved around the viper as if they were old friends. "Fascinating," the Empress murmured to herself. "Perhaps these humans are more interesting than I thought." Sarah spent the next several hours examining the serpent, taking samples, and running analysis on her portable equipment. The void viper remained patient throughout, occasionally shifting position to give Sarah better access to affected areas. It was clear that despite her fearsome reputation, Nethys was in considerable pain. As the alien suns began to set, casting the throne room in deeper shadow, Sarah finally looked up at the Empress with determination in her eyes. "I know what's killing her," she announced, "and I think I can save her. But it's going to require something that goes against everything your species believes about strength and dominance." The Empress leaned forward on her throne. "Speak." "She's going to have to trust me completely. And you're going to have to let me treat her my way, without interference from your court physicians or guards. No weapons, no threats, no shows of force. Just me and her, working together." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber from the assembled courtiers. No one had ever demanded such terms from Empress Vexandra. The silence stretched until Sarah began to wonder if she had just signed her own death warrant. Finally, the Empress spoke. "You have 24 hours, human. If Nethys dies, you die with her. If she lives—" The alien ruler paused, studying Sarah with new interest. If she lives, perhaps humans are worthy of our attention after all. Dawn came too soon. Sarah had spent the night in a chamber near the serpent's pit, analyzing her samples and preparing her treatment plan. What she had discovered made her stomach turn. The microscopic organisms eating away at Nethys weren't natural parasites. They were artificially created, designed specifically to target void viper biology. Someone had tried to assassinate the Empress by killing her most prized companion. Sarah descended into the pit carrying a bag filled with supplies she had requested from the palace laboratories. The void viper's condition had worsened overnight. More scales had turned gray and begun to flake away, exposing raw flesh underneath. The great serpent's breathing was shallow and labored. "Good morning, Nethys," Sarah said softly as she approached. "I know you're in pain, but I'm going to help you feel better." The viper's massive head turned toward her, those intelligent eyes now dimmed with suffering. Sarah felt a stab of anger at whoever had done this to such a magnificent creature. She set down her bag and began pulling out the equipment she would need. "The first thing we need to do is clean these wounds," she explained, as much to calm the serpent as to organize her own thoughts. "Then I'm going to inject you with something that will kill the organisms eating your scales. It's going to hurt at first, but then you'll start feeling better." As Sarah began cleaning the affected areas with a gentle antiseptic solution, she heard footsteps above. The Empress had arrived to watch the treatment, along with what sounded like half the court. Sarah tried to ignore the audience and focus on her patient. The cleaning process revealed the full extent of the damage. The artificial parasites had eaten through several layers of scales in multiple locations, creating wounds that would have been agonizing. Yet Nethys remained perfectly still as Sarah worked, only occasional muscle tremors betraying her pain. "You're being so brave," Sarah murmured. "Much braver than most of my human patients would be." She prepared the first injection, a cocktail of antibiotics and anti-parasitic agents that she had modified for Zephyrian biology. The needle was enormous, designed to penetrate the viper's thick hide. As Sarah approached with it, she expected Nethys to tense or try to pull away. Instead, the great serpent actually moved closer, presenting her flank for the injection. "Impossible," came the Empress's voice from above. "Nethys attacks anyone who approaches her with a weapon. She once killed a guard who accidentally pointed a spear in her direction." Sarah paused, looking up at the throne room. "This isn't a weapon, it's medicine. She can sense the difference." The injection itself was massive by human standards, but tiny compared to the void viper's enormous body. Sarah administered it carefully, then moved to the next location. By the time she had given all 12 injections, she was exhausted, but Nethys seemed more alert. "Now comes the hard part," Sarah announced. "The medicine will kill the parasites, but that means your body has to flush out all the dead organisms and damaged tissue. It's going to be uncomfortable for a few hours." As if on cue, the viper began to shudder. The silver veins in her scales flickered erratically. Sarah had expected this reaction, but it was still alarming to watch such a powerful creature in distress. "It's okay," she said, placing both hands on the serpent's side. "I know it feels awful, but it means the treatment is working." What happened next shocked everyone watching. The void viper, the most dangerous predator in the known galaxy, carefully coiled herself around Sarah in what could only be described as a protective embrace. Not tight enough to hurt the human, but close enough to seek comfort from her presence. The throne room fell completely silent. Even the Empress seemed stunned by what she was witnessing. "In 300 years, Vexandra said quietly, Nethys has never shown affection to any living being. She tolerates my presence because I am her master. But this is something else entirely." Sarah found herself surrounded by warm, trembling coils. The viper's breathing was still labored, but her eyes remained focused on the human woman. She knows I'm trying to help her, Sarah said. Fear makes everything worse. Trust makes healing possible. The purging process took 6 hours. During that time, Sarah remained within Nethys's coils, monitoring her vital signs and providing comfort. She told the serpent stories about Earth, about the snakes she had worked with in her research. She described forests and oceans, snow and rain, concepts foreign to a creature born in the sterile environment of a space station. Gradually, the shuddering stopped. The silver veins in Nethys's scales began to pulse with renewed strength. The gray patches started to darken, showing signs of healing. "Look!" Sarah called out in excitement. "The scales are regenerating!" Indeed, where the gray patches had been, new scales were beginning to form. They were smaller than the originals, but healthy and strong. The Void Viper lifted her head, and for the first time since Sarah had arrived, her eyes were clear and bright. "The immediate danger is over," Sarah announced to the watching court. "But she'll need ongoing treatment for the next few days. The new scales will be vulnerable until they fully harden." "Remarkable," the Empress said, her voice carrying a note of respect that hadn't been there before. "You have accomplished something my entire medical staff said was impossible." Sarah climbed out of the serpent's embrace and began packing her equipment. "With respect, Your Majesty, your medical staff approached this like a conquest. Sometimes healing requires surrender, not of the patient, but of the healer's need to dominate." As she spoke, Nethys raised her great head and gently touched Sarah's shoulder with her snout. It was clearly a gesture of gratitude, and it sent another wave of amazement through the assembled courtiers. "There is one more thing we need to discuss," Sarah continued, turning to face the Empress directly. "The organisms that infected Nethys, they didn't evolve naturally. Someone created them specifically to kill Void Vipers." The temperature in the throne room plummeted. The Empress's scales shifted to deep purple, a sign of rage. "You are certain of this?" "Completely. The targeting was too precise, too specific. This was biological warfare, designed to hurt you by destroying something you value." Vexandra's 4 hands curled into fists. "Who would dare?" "I don't know yet. But I can help you find out. The parasites were sophisticated, which means they required significant resources to develop. There can't be many organizations in this sector with that capability." The Empress stood from her throne, her imposing figure casting shadows across the chamber. "You would help us identify the perpetrators, even though they targeted my property, not your people?" Sarah looked back at Nethys, who was now resting comfortably, her breathing steady and strong. "They tried to kill an innocent creature to hurt you. That makes it personal." For the first time since Sarah had arrived, she saw something that might have been a smile cross the Empress's features. "Fascinating. Your species bonds with other creatures across biological boundaries. Most races in this galaxy view such behavior as weakness. Maybe that's why most races in this galaxy are constantly at war with each other." The Empress considered this for a long moment. Then she gestured to her guards. "Escort Dr. Chen to the guest quarters. See that she has everything she needs. Tomorrow we begin investigating this attack." As Sarah prepared to leave the throne room, Nethys called out to her with a sound like distant thunder. The Viper's massive head tracked her movement all the way to the doors, and those intelligent eyes held what Sarah could only interpret as affection. "I'll see you tomorrow, beautiful," Sarah promised. "We'll make sure you're completely healed." Behind her, the Empress watched the interaction with growing fascination. In one day, this small human had accomplished what the greatest minds in her empire had declared impossible. She had tamed the untamable and healed the unhealable. Perhaps it was time to reconsider her assumptions about the species from the small blue planet. As the throne room doors closed behind Sarah, Vexandra descended into the pit to check on her companion. Nethys greeted her with the same respectful attention she had always shown. But the Empress could see something new in the Viper's demeanor, a contentment that hadn't been there before. "She changed you too, didn't she, my friend?" the Empress murmured, stroking the serpent's newly healed scales. "This human doctor with her gentle hands and healing touch. Perhaps there is more to strength than I realized." 3 days later, Sarah stood in the palace war room surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts and intelligence reports. Nethys was now fully healed, her scales restored and stronger than ever. But the investigation into who had tried to assassinate the Empress through biological warfare had revealed a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of galactic politics. "The trail leads to the hegemony of Keth," General Zixtar reported, his multiple eyes focusing on different data streams simultaneously. "Their bioweapons division has been developing anti-Zephyrian agents for the past 5 years. Empress Vexandra studied the evidence with cold fury. The Kethian hegemony controlled the neighboring star system and had been pushing for expansion into Zephyrian territory for decades. An attack on Nethys was not just an attempt on the Viper's life, it was a declaration of war. "They sought to weaken me emotionally," the Empress said, her voice like ice. "They believed that destroying my companion would make me vulnerable to their assault." Sarah examined the bioweapon specifications that had been recovered from captured Kethian agents. The sophistication was impressive and terrifying. They didn't just want to kill Nethys, they wanted her to suffer. "Look at these attack vectors. The parasites were designed to cause maximum pain while ensuring a slow death." "Psychological warfare," General Zixtar agreed. "They wanted to demonstrate their ability to strike at the heart of our empire." The Empress turned to Sarah, her expression calculating. "Dr. Chen, your analysis of their bioweapon revealed weaknesses they did not anticipate. Could you develop countermeasures for other potential attacks?" Sarah hesitated. She was a healer, not a weapons designer. But she also understood that sometimes the best defense was being prepared for the worst attacks. "I could develop vaccines and treatments for biological agents. But I'd need access to your military research facilities." "Done. But first, we have a more immediate problem." The Empress activated a new hologram showing fleet movements in deep space. "Kethian forces are mobilizing for a full assault. They believe my grief over Nethys's death will make me weak. They plan to attack within the week." "Except Nethys isn't dead," Sarah pointed out, "and you're not weak." A predatory smile crossed the Empress's features. "Exactly. They have given us a perfect opportunity to demonstrate just how wrong their assumptions about strength really are." 2 hours later, Sarah found herself back in the throne room, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Word had spread throughout the palace that the human doctor had not only saved the Empress's companion, but had also uncovered an assassination plot. Courtiers who had viewed her with suspicion now watched with curiosity and respect. Nethys emerged from her pit using a new mechanical lift that had been installed for her comfort. The great Viper moved with fluid grace, her restored scales gleaming like liquid starlight. When she saw Sarah, she made that rumbling purr sound and gently touched the human's hand with her snout. "She missed you," the Empress observed, watching the interaction with fascination. "In 3 centuries, Nethys has never shown such attachment to any being." Sarah stroked the smooth scales along the Viper's jaw. "The feeling is mutual. She's an remarkable creature." "Dr. Chen," the Empress said formally, "I have a proposition for you. The Kethian fleet will arrive in 4 days. They expect to find us demoralized and weakened. Instead, I propose we show them exactly what happens when someone threatens those under our protection." Sarah looked up from Nethys, sensing that something significant was about to be proposed. "What did you have in mind?" "I want you to accompany our response fleet as Chief Medical Officer. Your presence will serve 2 purposes. First, you can continue developing countermeasures against biological weapons. Second, When word spreads that the human who saved Nethys stands with us, it will send a message to the galaxy about the value we place on those who show loyalty and skill. The offer was tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Sarah had never been in a space battle, and the idea of facing the Kethian war fleet was daunting. But she also understood the larger implications. Humanity's relationship with the galactic community would be shaped by how they were perceived by major powers like the Zephyrian Empire. "I'll do it," Sarah said, "but with one condition. If we capture any Kethian soldiers, they receive proper medical treatment regardless of their crimes. No torture, no cruel punishment." Several courtiers gasped at the audacity of a human making demands of the Empress, but Vexandra merely nodded approvingly. "Agreed. Mercy from a position of strength demonstrates confidence. We will show them that we are powerful enough to be generous." The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah worked with Zephyrian scientists to develop broad-spectrum treatments for potential biological attacks. She learned to operate in zero gravity and familiarized herself with alien medical equipment. Most importantly, she spent time with Nethys, who would also be accompanying the fleet. The Void Viper, it turned out, was not just a companion animal. She was a weapon of war, capable of surviving in vacuum and delivering devastating attacks against enemy ships. But her bond with Sarah had changed her behavior in subtle ways. She was calmer, more focused, and seemed to understand that her human friend would be in danger during the coming battle. On the morning of departure, Sarah stood in the hangar bay watching the Zephyrian battle fleet prepare for launch. The ships were works of art as much as instruments of war, their hulls covered in the same shifting scale patterns that adorned their creators. The flagship, Eternal Dominion, was large enough to house a small city. "Nervous?" the Empress asked, approaching in her ceremonial battle armor. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "I'm a doctor, not a soldier." "But you are something more valuable than either," Vexandra replied. "You are someone who chooses compassion over fear, healing over harm. That kind of strength is rarer than you know." As they boarded the flagship, Nethys coiled herself around Sarah's shoulders like a living cape. The sight of the human woman wearing a Void Viper as a protective companion sent whispers of awe through the ship's crew. In Zephyrian culture, such a display was the ultimate symbol of trust and power. The journey to the battle zone took 18 hours. During that time, Sarah established a medical bay and prepared for casualties. She also spent time on the bridge learning about space combat tactics and observing how the Zephyrian military operated. When the Kethian fleet finally appeared on the sensors, it was massive, over 200 ships arranged in attack formation. They had clearly expected to face a demoralized enemy and had brought overwhelming force to ensure quick victory. "Incoming transmission from the Kethian flagship," the communications officer reported. "Put it through," the Empress commanded. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a squat, heavily armored alien with tusks and small, cruel eyes. "Empress Vexandra," he sneered. "I am Admiral Gorthak. Surrender now and your death will be swift." "Admiral," the Empress replied with icy calm, "I'm afraid I must decline. You see, your biological weapon failed to achieve its intended effect." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the Kethian's features. "Impossible. The Void Viper is dead. Our agents confirmed the infection." "Perhaps you should have sent better agents." The Empress gestured, and Nethys moved into view of the camera. The great serpent was clearly healthy and very much alive. Admiral Gorthak's expression changed from confidence to shock to rage. "Then we will destroy you by conventional means." "I think not," the Empress said softly. "You made one critical error in your planning, Admiral. You assumed that showing mercy was weakness. Let me demonstrate why you were wrong." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Zephyrian fleet, outnumbered 3-1, fought with precision and coordination that seemed almost telepathic. But it was Nethys who became the turning point of the engagement. Released from the flagship in a specially designed combat suit, the Void Viper moved through space like a living torpedo. Her ability to phase briefly out of normal space-time, a defensive mechanism of her species, allowed her to appear inside enemy ships without warning. Her venom, delivered through specially designed projectiles, could disable entire crews in minutes. But most importantly, she fought with intelligence and strategy rather than simple aggression. Sarah watched from the medical bay as Nethys systematically targeted command and control systems, leaving enemy ships disabled rather than destroyed. "She's fighting to capture, not kill," Sarah realized, speaking into her communicator. "She learned mercy from watching me treat her." The Empress's voice came back filled with amazement. "A predator who chooses restraint when she could choose slaughter. Your influence has reached further than either of us imagined." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Kethian fleet was completely disabled, but largely intact. Casualties were remarkably light on both sides, exactly what Sarah had hoped for when she insisted on proper medical treatment for prisoners. Admiral Gorthak was brought aboard the Eternal Dominion in restraints, his arrogance replaced by bewildered defeat. "This is impossible," he kept repeating. "Our intelligence said the Viper was dead. Our intelligence said you were weakened by grief." "Your intelligence," the Empress replied, "failed to understand the true nature of strength." She gestured to Sarah, who was treating wounded Kethian prisoners with the same care she would give to Zephyrian casualties. "Strength is not about dominating others through fear. It is about inspiring loyalty through trust, healing instead of harming, and choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy." Gorthak looked at the human woman, then at Nethys coiled protectively around her. "A human tamed the Void Viper?" "No," Sarah said, looking up from her patient. "We became friends. There's a difference." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood once again in the throne room of the Imperial Palace. But this time, she was not alone. A delegation from Earth had arrived, led by Admiral Patricia Reyes of the Terran Space Navy. The successful defense against the Kethian assault had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, and suddenly everyone wanted to understand how humans had gained the favor of the Zephyrian Empire. "Dr. Chen," Admiral Reyes said formally, "by order of the United Earth Government, you are hereby commended for your service to interstellar peace." Sarah accepted the medal, but her attention was focused on Nethys, who had taken up permanent residence in the throne room. The Great Viper's presence had become a symbol of the new alliance between humans and Zephyrians. "Your Majesty," Admiral Reyes continued, "Earth is honored to accept your offer of mutual defense treaty." Empress Vexandra nodded regally. "The terms remain as discussed. Earth provides medical expertise and humanitarian advisors. Zephyria provides military protection and advanced technology. Together we shall demonstrate to the galaxy that true strength comes not from conquest, but from the bonds we forge with those who share our values." As the formal ceremonies concluded, Sarah found herself standing beside Nethys's pit, watching the great serpent play with a new enrichment toy, a sphere that projected holographic fish for her to chase. The Viper had healed completely, but more than that, she seemed genuinely happy for the first time since Sarah had met her. "She will miss you when you return to Earth," the Empress said, joining Sarah at the pit's edge. "Who says I'm returning to Earth?" Sarah replied with a smile. "Someone has to stay here and continue developing medical countermeasures. Besides, someone has to make sure Nethys gets her regular checkups." The Void Viper looked up at the sound of her name, and Sarah could swear she saw affection in those ancient, intelligent eyes. It had taken an assassination attempt and a space battle, but out of it had come something unprecedented in galactic history. A true partnership between species based on mutual respect and understanding. The Empress, who had never imagined a human could tame her venomous serpent, had learned something far more valuable. She had learned that the greatest strength came not from inspiring fear, but from inspiring love. And in the years that followed, that lesson would transform not just the Zephyrian Empire, but the entire galaxy.